The next presenter is Martin McKinnon. Martin was in a previous life, was head of marketing at Qantas. He also ran a large advertising agency in Melbourne, and I think we can all look forward to his perspective on this issue. So without further ado, I'll introduce Martin. Thank you.
Morning all. This is the marketing bit, boo-hiss, the Antichrist. I am here. Look, two things to start with, a promise and an apology. The promise is that I will finish on time. I've heard about getting between you lot and lunch. And the apology is that in the previous life at Qantas, I actually controlled the budget for a lot of this stuff. So if you came and pitched to me and I said no, I'm very, very sorry about that. I have changed since. Okay, so this is to put a commercial context on what I think is an absolutely fabulous topic, and I'll prove that to you later on because I've joined a company that does this very thing since. This is, as it says, a commercial viewpoint. I'm not going to presume in the next wee while to talk to you about CSR, the construction of it, or the process, or even the outcomes from it, because you've got experts in abundance who'll do that far more effectively than me. But I am going to pose a couple of viewpoints that CSR, in a marketing sense, in a brand sense, is probably the most powerful thing going. And that's from some previous lives that Ken mentioned, including running an advertising agency, in all that connotes, and also being, I guess, at the guts of one of the more interesting marketing jobs in the country. Some of the charts that I'll put up, I've had for about 3.5 years, and the reason I've had them for that long, perhaps even longer, is that I've believed in this for a long time, as the charts will kind of prove, but I had to put them in a drawer because it hadn't come of its time yet. I'm using the same charts now. They haven't changed a bit, but I'm getting a lot more nods. I met with a banking person this morning, and this is a series of folks I've met in the last, 3 or 4 months. I've not had any of them say to me, get out, or, some of them say get out, but that's probably a personal hygiene issue. None of them have said the topic's rubbish or I don't want to do this. It's all about the how now. It's not about the what. So I sense this is really kind of come of age, and I guess it's very interesting, the turnout here, and the fact that a whole bunch of other things are going on, the Senate committee, etc., on CSR. So I've always believed in this, and I think this now is its time. And it's interesting that the great segue from Ken was about creativity, because I'll be arguing that one of the great things about CSR, and one of the things that it can give and needs to give, is creativity from a brand viewpoint. If you don't like that, well, kind of hard luck, because I haven't got a plan B. Right, there's a whole bunch of reasons why CSR is great, most of which you've heard and will hear, and there's bags of persuasive evidence. The cost of society, that companies factor in their cost analysis, stakeholder focus rather than just shareholder focus and language, better staff come and stay with companies who practice and embody CSR, company practices change, etc., etc., etc. But really, at the most base level for me, and I'm fairly basic, it's the right thing to do, of course, and it's fundamentally much better for business when you do. Trouble's been, and I say this from, I'll jump kind of hats just now, I'll say this from the point of view of being in the companies before, hasn't really covered itself with glory in the past. And I think I'm experiencing sticker shock. There's a whole bunch of variances in understanding, is my experience about CSR. It was very badly understood a few years ago, and it's becoming better understood now, but it's not anywhere near a common consensus. And any one of these points of the circle will be someone's in point. So you talk to some people and they say, oh, it's image-led. You know, it's the sort of stuff you do because you want to get a better reputation. Cool. Other folks will say, no, it's compliance-led. You've got to do this, otherwise they'll lock you up. Oh, H&S, you know, fiscal responsibility. Ooh. Trouble is, in the middle bit there, the entry point's not always clear. So my conversation to someone may not be how they're listening to this. And I don't think it's covered itself with glory in the past. So when you say CSR now, there's a whole variety of interpretations that are going on from the listener. And some of the reasons, settle, thank you, is that the scary versus glib side of it over the years has kind of, I think, been a bit of a worry. There's been a bunch of people, you know, the ferals who've been running around screaming at companies that they must do things because the world's going to hell in a handbasket, and they've kind of got these metal breastplates on. There's this great shriek about the things you've got to do because you're big and you've got money and you just have to. And then there's a kind of the other side of that spectrum is the kind of the Pollyanna side of it. You know, everything's wonderful and oh, you know, it's all getting better and better and all that sort of stuff. Neither of which is particularly helpful when you're in a big company and you've got issues biting at your rear end by the minute. You've got a very short window to understand what the topic is and to find out how you might fold this into what it is that you're doing anyway. So I don't think it's been helped over the years by the extremes that have been out there. Plus, who do you talk to? You know, if you're a company and you say, yeah, I want a bit of this, I've got to have a bit of this, they might legislate me to have a bit of this. Where do you go? Who do you talk to? You know, the image side of it doesn't kind of match with the compliance, and you know, you end up with a bunch of people who have their own circle themselves, and you've got to speak to 10 people. It's kind of not helpful. At the perhaps marketing end of it, there's the I want to do this because it's good, and you know, there might be some colourful imagery out of this, and it's nice, and all the senior management will nod, and that's great, rather than I should do this because of the compliance side of it. So there's an emotional, rational battle going on as well, as Ken was saying, the creative side of this versus the rational, have-to side of it. And then within the company, where do you get the attention? Got the budget? Is it me? Or is it the CEO or the chairman, or where? Where do you get the attention to get the funding to make the difference? So this is a view about perhaps talking to you about one way of finding the entry point here, and how I think that CSR has to be absolutely aligned with the brand intentions of the company. That's the critical bit as well. So let me just have a few minutes to have a bash at this from the brand viewpoint. To do that, I just need to go back a wee bit and tell you what my beliefs are in terms of why brands would want to do this. So if this is kind of relationship branding 101, have a kit now because it gets better later on. But I need to do this for 2 minutes to make sure we're on the same page. There's a lot of talk about loyalty, and really loyalty is just what you're doing. It's behavioural. Okay, it's trying to drive your company using the rear view mirror as a guide. Doesn't help. It may or may not be commitment to the brand. Commitment's the important thing. How do I feel? How much do I feel attached to this brand or otherwise? What's the relationship I have with it? Interestingly, with some work I did in previous lives, Australians and New Zealanders have the lowest commitment to brands in almost every category measured of almost any country on earth. So the old thing about if you make it in New York, you can make it anywhere is not right. If you can make it in Australia and New Zealand, you can make it anywhere. We're a hard bunch. We're a hard bunch. And if you've got an hour and a half, you know, I've got some theories on being brought here in chains and this kind of, you know, sentiment and, you know, kind of up you Jack commitment to levels in some cases. So we're a hard audience. We're a hard audience to convince. And if you don't have that commitment, then of course marketing gets pushed into this game scenario. The game of marketing is to convince you to do something, and your roles in the game are to unearth the strategy behind the marketing, which you may play by consuming. So if you haven't got the commitment, this just just becomes this tactical game, which isn't really helping kind of anyone. And in an environment worldwide, but especially in Australia and New Zealand, where we strongly believe that a whole bunch of people have let us down and continue to let us down. So, you can go back as the Bonds, the cases, it continues. There are people in court every day not covering themselves with glory. So, from a marketing perspective, it's critically difficult to have a meaningful conversation with consumers now, or with stakeholders. You just can't get the attention. So if I can't get your attention and you're not even listening, how on earth am I going to be able to give you any sort of message, persuasive or otherwise, if you're just not listening? So customer commitment at the very start point is about getting someone to listen to what you might have to say. Thank you. Relationships. Okay. What's a brand? Well, this is one definition. You'll have others, but I think unless you have a relationship with your consumers, you don't have a brand at all. You've got a product or a service. And without the relationship, that's all you're doing. You're producing stuff or being a service. And what companies want customers to do, that is to be aware of them and to like them and to use them again and tell others about them, is not that far from what customers want. They actually want brands that are familiar and admired and constant and trusted, so they can build a relationship. We are desperately seeking relationships, both of us, both the brands and the consumers. So you might say, well, what's the bloody problem here? Just get on with it, because we all want the same thing. Well, of course, there's a huge gulf because of the trust issue. Cynicism has soared, and trust has plummeted because of some of the stuff I was talking about before. So although we want to have sustainable relationships, because we're built that way, we are socially gregarious creatures, we're not born to die alone, it's not what we're getting. But if you look at this from a commercial viewpoint, and I'll try and prove this with a chart in a second, a sustainable relationship between customers, certainly, and a brand is, I believe, the only sustainable competitive differentiator that is left to brands. It's not advertising or image stuff, that helps. It's not product or service, that certainly helps. It's this strength of relationship. It's the only thing that you cannot match quickly that your competitors got. Interestingly, when you ask customers or stakeholders about brands and how they see them, it's impossible for people not to give brands or companies personal attributes. In other words, you can't have a relationship with a building, as I'm saying here. They give human qualities to brands and companies. It's just impossible to not do it, because, again, I think our life is shaped by the relationships that we have, our parents, our partners, whatever, and we just automatically give these things to brands and companies. So we're always giving human dimensions. And if you, in order to tease out what people think about companies and brands, you take this further and you say, okay, well, I'll make the brand a person or the company a person, and I'd like you to think of the brand or company at a cocktail party. And I'd like you to tell me what this brand/person does. Well, there's no difficulty. In fact, you can't stop people doing this. They go, you can't shut them up once you start. And it gets quite interesting quite quickly, this, because they immediately get into this, oh, here's a cocktail party where the people are brands, not actual people. And they've got no difficulty whatsoever in telling you how these brand people look and how they behave and who else they talk to and, all that kind of stuff. But where it gets really interesting, I think, is when you say to them, okay, get inside the person and tell me what you believe that person/brand believes. Then they have to put away the kind of the silly game they've been playing, because I've asked people about brands at cocktail parties, and someone said, well, brand X, what would brand X be doing? Big brand, this. Or they'd be cleaning up after the cocktail party. They'd be scrubbing the floor. Well, that's helpful. What about brand Y? Or they'd be picking your pockets while you're having a drink. Right. And the other one was, Brand said, they'd be stealing the sandwiches and putting them in their bag for later on. So to try and get them off that, because that's where they want to live, and to say, what do you think this brand believes, is where it gets interesting, because then we start to talk about motives. So let me explain that if I can, with a wee chart here. The one that I dragged out, that trust, duh. This is Martin's wheel, right? Brand wheel. Forget about Occam's razor and Foucault's pendulum. This is Martin's wheel. I think this is what brands are about. On the top right there, image, what you say about the brand, the kind of stuff that you ask people to believe about the brand, the paid stuff is self-explanatory. The physical stuff, what do? Your product, the service, yeah, get that. Where it gets interesting, and if I can encourage you to consider this as a kind of a clock or a spiral, three-dimensional, the relationship starts at 12 and is at the thinnest point and gets deeper as you go around clockwise. So when you get into the left-hand side of the wheel, and the bottom left quadrant, and you get into the behavioural aspects, then you're actually starting to form the basis of a relationship, because it's how you deliver what it is that you've got. And at that point, I'm starting to see your people or your culture or your behaviour at work. But where it gets really interesting is the top left, the motives of the brand. What do you think, or what do you believe the brand believes? And just to expand on that a little, I clearly brought the wrong finger today, is there? Thank you. At the right-hand side, there's huge cynicism. Have you ever seen an ad that said, this product's smaller and worse? Bigger, better, new, improved. It's always that. So we have this filter of, well, you paid, you would say that. At the physical level, you've got a good product or service, but I've got a suspicion they may have one as well. If not today, then tomorrow, unless you've got an iPod. Free commercial for Apple. Plus, the whole right-hand side is about promised. I promise you in this ad, and by dint of this product or service, that we will be ... So it's market-driven. I cannot do any better than the market will allow me to do in this regard. So consequently, lower relationship potential. Yeah. What am I going to say about the left-hand side? This is experiential. It's the brand at work. I see how you behave on this side. You earn the right. You don't claim it. It's transparently delivered. I can see you at work here, and no surprise, that's company-driven. So it's the company that clearly is able to perform, and therefore there's a high relationship potential. If you look at this in another way, the right-hand side's promise, the left-hand side's delivery. And interestingly, I think, and this would take another 5 hours, I think the right-hand side is quite masculine, and I think the left-hand side is quite feminine in terms of being more subtle, networked, more pervasive, deeper, all that sort of stuff. But I digress. So clearly, my belief is that CSR, and this is why I said at the start that I fundamentally believe in this from a brand and marketing perspective, exists in the left-hand side of this wheel, and most particularly in the top left quadrant, in the motives, the beliefs of the brand. That's what you're saying when you do CSR. So this is not just good to do for society, this is critical to do from a marketing brand perspective. So what CSR does, enables you to do, is to take the left-hand side of that wheel, the beliefs and the culture, and to actually deliver an experience about the brand, this direct line of sight from the brand. So from the brand promise, you're able to manifest what it is that you do to a whole bunch of stakeholders who may well have different requirements and viewpoints and all the rest of it, if that makes any sense. Okay. Let me just tell you a little bit how this works at Qantas currently and what they're doing. This is not going to be one of these drawn-out case studies, but I'll just give you a quick kind of reality snapshot on this. Lest you didn't know, the airline industry is just furiously competitive. In fact, yesterday I think Ozjet started, so as we speak, it's kind of the beat goes on. Huge number of stakeholders for Qantas. I mean, you all got your own viewpoint. My Qantas is what people say, and rightly so. So it's got, as many stakeholders as kind of, Telstra does at least. Recent history, you don't have to go back, very far before there are a series of events that just rock the industry. ANZSIC collapse, 9/11, SARS, blah, 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 and it just goes on. So constant shock syndrome is alive and well in the airline industry. So a large part of stuff facing Qantas is about survival. It really is. How are you going to survive in an industry that is furiously hungry for investment and not known for delivering huge returns on that investment? So this is a really hard industry. So with all this stuff going on and that sort of basis, just surviving has been incredibly important. And Jeff Dixon and John Bogetti and others and Margaret Jackson have done a phenomenal job, I think. So there's the Qantas commercial. So, kind of what was their issue? Well, two things really. Surviving in this rapidly changing and quite ferociously kind of predatory environment was the one, but they're not just a big company who's competing internationally. Under the name is the Spirit of Australia. This is an iconic brand in Australia. Believe me, being the brand custodian for a number of years, the Spirit of Australia is not just a strapline. There's noblesse oblige in here. There are expectations, there are obligations if you are the Spirit of Australia, or at least the part of it that you can manifest in what it is that you do. So if you look at these two things, we're trying to survive. Excuse me, I'm a bit busy for the minute. Doing this, but I'm also this iconic thing. What do you need to do to bring these two together and manifest this in the kind of CSR space? It's critical, says the button, thank you, to stay connected in all of what you do, because it's easy, if you look at the top left one there, to get preoccupied and diverted with survival and not to pay enough attention about the brand side of things, manifest in the Spirit of Australia. So it's critical to stay connected to these key audiences that they have. So in terms of building the strategy out of this, there were some other issues at Qantas, and in keeping with a lot of organisations, I'll just call it crudely sponsorships, but community programs, social things, all the stuff that they did had grown up, had evolved organically over the years. If there's three people you're going to call if you want sponsorship, it's probably Qantas, it's probably a bank, and it's probably a telco. You can imagine the kind of approaches to Qantas. So the sponsorship portfolio, the community portfolio, had grown up over the years. The airline, because it's one of those three, supported a huge number of causes, and I'll mention a few things a little later on that they do, but there was little recognition from this and consequent management frustration, because if you're spending that sort of money and getting involved with those sort of causes, fair do, you expect a little bit of credit for that, and that wasn't always the case. So it required a plan, a strategic platform, an umbrella if you like, or a platform from which to jump by, frankly rules to say no by, and also this direct line of sight from the brand promise. If you remember that diagram with the arrow coming out of the experience, this has to hold true with the brand promise. So put that together, need to stay connected, Spirit of Australia, it's as dumb as sharing the spirit. I say dumb because I kind of did it. So sharing the spirit wasn't some big, 48-week strategic lockup. It was basically putting those two things together. From sharing the spirit, that allows you to reframe what you're doing currently. Talk about that in a second. But it also gives you this new criteria for involvement in the future. So we may have grown up sponsorship from a whole bunch of sources, but in the future it will be this way, and it will be done according to this way. And I'll show you that in a second. Okay, so in terms of connecting or making sure that you reconnect, we picked four things. Could have been any four, but these ones seem to be, perhaps the most sensible to start off with. Okay. Physically connecting cities in regional Australia, that's what kind of Qantas does. Aspirationally connecting dreams, aspirations and youth. Emotionally connecting frequent flyers with their families and loved ones. And connecting Qantas and their customers together with communities, charities, social programs, etc. And of course, all of these things, staff. Will you behave? Sharing the spirit physically. Okay, a couple of quickie. I'll just rocket through these because you can wax on, but if it's not your company, you kind of go, well, so I'll just keep going. Cities in regional Australia, taking the things that you sponsor and the famous people that you sponsor and doing good regionally. Underprivileged kids, kids who don't get stuff either in a sporting sense or an arts sense, NRL coaching stuff, Kieran Perkins, etc. Peter Morrissey went round, phenomenal response to a fashion designer from places like Broome and up on the Kimberley. The communities just went nuts. They just don't see these sort of people up there. Bangara, Spirit Tours. Also the other way around, Kickstart, Indigenous kids coming from the Northern Territory, footy players who played the what do you call it, the curtain opener at the MCG. I mean, how good were these kids? One of our staff, we run all this for Qantas, one of our staff said, that has changed my life, seeing these kids. So they're kind of emotional stuff. So you get that physically, yeah? Aspirationally, this is really interesting. I'm really proud of this one. This is about getting young people to show how good they are and how good they can be in a whole bunch of these categories. Interesting communities there. That's the Chairman's Award that we did for community engagement. But all those other things called the Spirit of Youth Awards, Sawyer. They put entries in. They can win $5,000 cash and $5,000 worth of travel. But interestingly, the ambassadors, some of the people you saw before there, mentor these kids in the chosen discipline for the next 12 months, which is kind of pretty cool. Hugely successful. This run in association with Noise Festival, who helped judging. 12,000 entries this year. The exhibits that came in, the thing happens at the Art Gallery in New South Wales and they get exhibited there. One of the kids last year in the industrial design thing went to work with Mark Newson, the Australian designer in Paris, and had been there a week, and Mark Newson said, "Oh, do you want a job?" "Well, don't want a job. Paris, yeah, I reckon." So he's still working there for Mark. I mean, how cool is that? That's cool. Sharing the spirit emotionally. I think this is interesting as a model. Why don't we get frequent flyers to get back in touch with their family? Gleefully kind of embrace them into Qantas during the week when they're flying. And they kind of say, have a good weekend, see you Monday again when you come flying, because these folks fly a lot. So why wouldn't we extend the relationship beyond the purely transactional or the commercial and build things that they can participate with their family, get some quality time back, and that gets quite deep into some of the stuff that was done. I'll show you in a second. Basically building a bridge between them and their families again. Hello. Righto. Financially, won't go through that. There's a whole swag of things that Qantas do. Some of them are quite funky. John Travolta dinner, if any of you came. It was quite nice. Some very creative things in there, to Ken's point again, about engaging. A model, get a hold of the famous people that you're attached to and the things that you do, sponsorship-wise, community-wise, and create these money can't buy experiences, but then charge people for it. Charge people for it. So Qantas customers, frequent flyers, come along to these things and give us money. But the money then goes to the charities, the community programs, the rest of stuff, who in turn help to organise these. I've got to say some better than others. There's a bunch of them that are really creative about this and say, yeah, I get that and we'd love to help you. And there's some others that just stick their hands out and say, give us money because we need it. That's the sort of activity level. 126 of these things done last year. 55,000 people engaged. Interestingly, the bottom three are all done by Qantas staff off their own bat. No one asked them to do this. Volunteer programs, been going for years. Flight attendants go to Ethiopia and dig a well. They just kind of do this stuff. So this is pervasive throughout the organisation. The Change for Good thing, $11 million, started by an Australian there, picked up globally. A guy in Australia decided that loose change on board would be a good idea. Qantas has. We might actually flick the video, folks. Might not bother with that after all that effort. I'm terribly sorry. We couldn't get it to work before, but we might just flick that, not worry. Or play it if you like, whichever you would rather do. I was going to show you what greets you on board, because the point I was trying to make here is that this direct line of sight from the brand means that I think it's fundamental to incorporate and embed what it is that you're doing as part of what it is that you do. So Qantas has got a huge audience. Qantas isn't just an airline. Qantas is a medium. 3.1 million frequent flyers in Australia, and all these 30 million people going through your kind of gates throughout the year is a fabulous opportunity to communicate. So whatever your gig is, whatever your business is, I think what you're doing in CSR and in a social sense needs to be fed directly into the way you do things, not just kind of stuck on. So what I was going to play you was what you see when you get on board, the postcards thing, which you've probably seen, which is all the Share in the Spirit stuff. So this is fundamental to the way Qantas operates. I know you spent 10 minutes trying to fix that. I think I'll get my head kicked as I go out. It's critical that the chairman and the CEO are involved in this. Margaret Jackson personally involved all the way through this. She and I spent a lot of time getting this done. She personally launched the Share in the Spirit program. It's critical that you earn this and don't claim it. There's never been an ad written on Share in the Spirit. Consistency and communications, of course. I'm only discussing marketing here as the start point to this. And as you would imagine, Qantas does a whole bunch of other things. Safety, Qantas, yeah, it would. I mean, its focus on safety within the company, OH&S-wise, is absolutely intense. And I could do another hour on what they do in that. Environmental work, yes. Fiscal responsibility, of course. Employment policies, yes, at the forefront. And even flights to non-economic destinations. And so do a bunch of other companies. But, unless you market this, unless you tell people about it, who would know? Who would know? And I guess what I'm saying here is that Share in the Spirit has been a platform from which Qantas is now able to open up the conversation into a bunch of other things that they do. And the reason I joined Brand Advantage a few months ago is because that's what we do. And because of my belief in this from years ago, the marketing entry point, I believe, is critical for organisations. We do it for Qantas and a bunch of other things. One commercial, one slide commercial. So pay attention. At Brand Advantage, this is what we do. We do this for we've actually got a company called Corporate Social Responsibility that we recently formed because we think this is of its time, and we do that to match up the company's corporate and brand objectives with what we're trying to do outside. Blah blah blah. Yeah, commercial over. It wasn't too painful, was it? Why do we do that? Because I said at the start, companies want customers to be loyal to them, and customers want a relationship. This is all based on trust. Now, when you get this right, people will do extraordinary things to protect the relationship. To a point that will complain less, and they'll forgive more, they'll pay more for things. So this isn't just kind of, we need a relationship. This is huge in terms of competitive advantage or competitive kind of step forward. It's based on trust, as I said before. But how do you get the trust? Well, you've got to tell people who you are and what you believe in and what your motives behind the corporate veneer is. You've actually got to show the spirit in however that manifests itself with your brand. And I think that CSR, the big opportunity for CSR, can be this beliefs in action. For companies, it's a fabulous, fabulous marketing tool. Okay, two slides more. Can CSR change the world? I don't know. And I hope so, maybe. But I think you've got to grab the attention of the right people first to change anything. And if you're in the audience going, he's the Antichrist, this is the marketing kind of, low point in the summit, and there's too much spin, and this is all too commercial. Well, hard luck. Because all my experience says that you've got to get the imagination first. You've got to actually have a conversation with someone who's listening to you. You've got to get the heart first, and then the head. You've got to get the emotions, then you get the commitment and the budget. You've got to start with a good idea. So, CSR realistic? Can you balance short-term profits with long-term social impact? And I don't know. I hope so, again. But the best chance I know you've got to start is to start with a competitive advantage and then watch the market beat a path to your door. Thank you very much.
Now, we've got a few minutes. Any questions for Martin? Okay, just there. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. I really enjoyed your presentation. Penny Richards from Earthwatch. I'm just interested if you could expand on this model that you've shown us today on what Qantas is doing in regards to environmental activities and its greenhouse gas emissions.
The short answer is I haven't come prepared to discuss that. I'm no longer with Qantas, and the bit I did there was sharing the spirit. But there's a whole bunch of work. In fact, there's an environmental guy at Qantas. There's a position there specifically to deal with environmental issues, which of course is, for transport, any transport company would be an issue. And there's a whole bunch of work gone in there, but I'd be very reluctant to say chapter and verse this is what they're doing, because I plain don't know the facts behind that. I do know they're talking about the carbon thing, don't crucify me for that, but the fact that they've got a department looking after this and they've got a guy in charge of environmental issues, I think speaks kind of volumes about their lean forward attitude to it. And they've been doing that for a long time. They're sharing the spirits as a package or a platform. It's been going about 18 months. But the environmental stuff and the safety thing and the whole bunch of other stuff predates that by a long time. So afterwards, I can probably give you the guy's name to talk to, and he'd be very happy to talk to you about that.
Okay, perhaps over there.
Hi Martin, Esther Gilmore. Just a question about quantifying the benefits of some of the work that you've been doing with clients. Have you been able to measure for them the impact on their bottom line from this brand focus on CSR?
Funny you mentioned that $50 worked, obviously. One of the things that, thank you so much, that Brand Advantage has got is an evaluation model. I've got to say it's built from a sporting basis, and most of those are built from an eyeball basis. So, we give good sign is kind of where that started from. But we've evolved that to incorporate tangible things. So when you get involved in a program or a community thing, or even a sponsorship, sporting-wise, we can evaluate to a dollar level the ROI on the impact that has on, eyeballs and audience. That's the tangible side of it. The intangible side of it is something we've also developed, which is to talk about, and this needs to be done in concert with some focus groups stuff, but to measure an impact on uniqueness of the thing you're doing, fit with the brand objectives, direct line of sight stuff that I was talking about there before, to give that an index and a measurement, things like ambush marketing and a whole bunch of other bits in there that combine to form a market value for the activity and then a strategic value for the company. So there might be a market